Hey everyone, welcome back. So today is Sunday, not much news going on with the miners, so I thought I would do a video on some things that I've learned, especially from that video that I did a while back on stopping Bitcoin mining, what I've learned from it, and how I would apply those things differently this time around if I was to go into Bitcoin mining again. So these are just some tips that I would probably follow this time around. And as always, not financial advice. You guys know the drill here. I'm investing in fund coins and companies. We won't talk about any companies, but I always do this anyways. And let's take a look at what we got here. So tips for starting Bitcoin mining, 5 years of lessons learned. This is everything that I've learned over those 5 years managing a Bitcoin mining farm from inception to build out everything else. This is where this is all coming from. Okay, so next is Bitcoin mining, when to start. That's a big question. There is, I think, a ideal time when you should start mining, but timing is everything. So bear or bull market, when should you be doing all these things? And as you can see here on the chart, we have bear markets, bull markets as well. The one from 2014, 2015 was 633 days of a bear market. Then we went from end of 2015 into 2018, basically, 845 days of a bull run. Then we had 361 days of a bear market, 192 days of a bull run, and then 260 days of bear, and then 407 days roughly in this recent bull run that we've had. Now we're in a bear market again. We've been in it pretty much for over a year. Bitcoin price peaked at 69,000 something in November of last year, right? So when you're in a bull market like we were last year, that is the time that you want to really plan, prepare. You want to figure out electrical pricing, contracts, and all that stuff. Find a location, building. Are you going to be doing a unit? Are you going to be building out your own building? Are you going to be using shipping containers, right? All this stuff has to be figured out at that time. And then you want to get everything ready for build out when you get into that bear market, and that's when you start building out. Take a look at the next slide. So build out in the bear market, you want to have basically your facilities, electrical, all planned out, ready to be built out in a bear market. You want to order ASIC miners right around 6 to 9 months into the bear market, usually. It's going to take a couple months to get the miners in, especially if they're coming from overseas. But that'll give you enough time to build everything out, get the miners in place, and be ready to go in the bull run. Miners also cost less in the bear market. In a bull market, the prices were really high, about $100 per terahash. Those were on the S19J Pros, which are 100 terahash miners. The 140 terahash miners were a little bit more. But when you get into a bear market, the cost comes way down. It comes down to, we've recently seen as low as $15.50 per terahash in this bear market currently within the last couple of weeks. When we started out mining or trying to build out and everything, we did it in 2017, right around the halfway point, right around May, June is when we started to look for facilities. We started buying miners at the same time, which was probably a mistake there. We should have, well, hindsight is 2020, right? We didn't know this. We know this now. But we started getting everything. We thought we could get everything done within possibly 6 months. But even then, that was going to be the peak of the bull run, which we didn't know about. Some things you just don't know until after they happen. So we started buying miners right around May, June. They didn't come in until like September, October. We had a facility, we were building that out. That didn't finish up until spring of 2018, which we were already firmly into a bear market at that point. We didn't start mining until probably around, I want to say May or June of that year. Fully mining, full blown. There were a lot of issues with electrical components not coming in on time, things like that. So it takes a while. So you're looking at 6 to 12 months for a build out. But we were also retrofitting a unit. So that's one of the things that we've learned is not to do a unit. We would probably have done a shipping container instead. And then we were able to mine a little bit here. And the bull run that we had a little bit, 182 days. Then we were in a bear market. We weren't really mining there. It wasn't profitable. And then we were mining again here in the latest bull run that we've had last year. Now we're mining again because we're in a bear market again. And it's just not feasible for us to possibly mine with the old miners that we do have. So this is from all those lessons learned there. But we paid $133 per terahash mid-2017, and that was on the S9 miner, 13.5 terahash at that point. Later on in 2018, those miners, and they came out with newer miners that were closer to 19 terahash, I believe. those were also priced a lot better. Those were around $30, $40, even lower than that sometimes. And it also depends on how many you're buying at that point. Okay, so that covers this part of it. Next is electricity pricing and location. So you have to find low-cost electricity providers, or you have to work with consultants. We've worked with a consultant, and we were able to get the price down to 6.5 cents per kilowatt hour, which was pretty good based on the draw of electricity that we were using. Going to be using a month. I think if we were going to be using even more, we could have possibly gotten down to maybe 5.5, 6 cents possibly. But we got a fixed rate for 3 years on that, 6.5 cents. Even though that was pretty low, it wasn't low enough in the bear markets for the miners. Getting a little bit old, they weren't able to be profitable at that point as well. So that's why I say 5 cents to 6 cents per kilowatt hour is the maximum you should be looking for if you're doing a large scale. Now, if you're doing home mining or something like that, you're going to be pretty much stuck at whatever the electricity provider has for your region. So it might be 10 cents, 8 cents, 12 cents, depending where you live. So there's not much wiggle room there. You also want to find, if you're going a lot larger, you want to find locations near substations. So usually when there's a substation nearby, you got high power lines all over the place. People don't want to live next to those. So the land usually next to those is a little bit less expensive. And the great thing is if you can get next door to a substation, the hookups are going to be a lot less costly, a lot quicker to do, and you'll be able to grow I would think much faster with less constraints from municipalities, permits, all that other stuff. It's going to be a lot easier because you're just right next door to a substation. The other thing is also to learn about peak demand curtailing. One of the things that we didn't know enough about when we started out was all the complexities in the electrical space for providers and generators. One of the things is they tell you, or at least they told us, it might be different for your region, but they told us that there's usually 4 or 5 peak days during the year where if you can curtail at that point, basically shut down or minimize the demand of electricity at that point, that will go towards your next year's possible peak demand rating, whatever they call it. But that is a huge impact. So you want to learn about all those things that you can do. And the consultants are great with that. They can even tell you when peak demand possibly might be when peak demand might be happening, and when you should be shutting down at that point. But the more you know about how the electrical system works, the demand, the peaks, and all that stuff is going to greatly improve your profitability going forward into the following years as well. Okay, fixed pricing. This is a big one. Get a 3-year minimum contract. If you can get a 5-year contract, all the better. But fixed pricing at the lowest price you can get is the way to go. With revolving pricing or market pricing, you're going to be at the mercy, and it's sometimes not going to be pretty. We've learned this with some of the other miners that I cover, like Argo. They're paying possibly around 9 cents, closer to maybe 10 cents now, with pricing going up for electricity, where before they were paying only 5.5, 6 cents. So it is a big reason to get fixed pricing, okay? So that's one of the main things you want to get into. Next, now buildings. Fixed versus shipping containers. So when I say fixed, I'm talking about actual buildings that you're building out. First, we'll cover fixed buildings. So these are costly, right? You have to build out a building, you got permits, you got construction, all that other stuff. Those are usually ideal for cooling setups, immersion cooling setups. So the picture down here is of Riot's immersion cooling system. I mean, you can see how massive this building is. This is obviously overkill for anybody that's starting out and doing Bitcoin mining, but Riot's been around for a long time, so they are able to put in that capital into this for many, many years where they can reuse it. So older miners, well, not older miners, but the S19 J Pros, which are 100 terahash or the 90 terahash miners that they have in those, they can overclock them. They can use them for a pretty long period of time, probably around anywhere between 4 and 6 years, if not longer. They can overclock them. They can get more efficiencies out of them, get more terahashes out of those, and they just last longer and operate better that way. So that way, when those get to their end of lifespan, they can transition over to the newer miners at that point, which in 5 years are going to be probably 300, 400 terahash miners or something like that, and dump them into these immersion cooling systems. So they're doing that, whereas somebody that's just starting out has some investors, pulled together or something like that, you're more than likely going to start out doing something like this, where I think this is the most economical way to do it, is these shipping containers. And this is from Moss Infrastructure site picture. And you basically just have these containers that are retrofitted for these miners. You have a rack on one side that pulls the air in from one side of the container and blows it out the other side of the container to keep the machines cool. But we'll get into that in a little bit here. So we've already covered the improved efficiencies. There is more failure points with these large buildings and cooling setups with immersion. You got the pumps, you got the heat transfer units, you got everything else. You're going to need more manpower to keep it all going, basically, right? So there's trade-offs for everything. If you get big enough to work to the point where you can do this, you can hopefully afford to have the employees to keep it all running. Now, shipping containers. They're air-cooled, quick install. They are a lot less expensive. Depending on how many miners you have in one of these units, you're looking anywhere possibly between 200,000 to maybe 500 or 600,000, depending on what your price is for the miners. But it also depends if you have 100 miners in there or if you have 200 miners in there. That's going to be depending on that. So somewhere in that ballpark, that's going to be your cost to get that up. You may need a pad on there. Sometimes you don't even need a pad. You just need some footings to put the units on. And then if you're really close to a substation, all you need is those transformers right here. And you got the electrical components already built into the container. You hook those babies up and you're ready to go. So, I mean, quick install, you're looking usually within a couple of weeks to get this up and running. The biggest thing is getting the transformers in. That can sometimes take some time. So that is also something to plan ahead for. Okay. They're less expensive. The fans will need maintenance on these shipping containers. And the filters will need to be cleaned, changed out from time to time, as they are constantly sucking that air out. And one of the things I would do maybe differently, instead of going with gravel, go something that's not going to cause any dust or something like that, just to prevent as little dust getting into those facilities as possible. You do have the filters, but still, any little kick up from anybody walking or anything like that will kick up dust. Or if you have wind, well, you're going to get a bunch of dust in there. So maybe put some kind of treatment to prevent the dust from kicking up on it. Okay, so those are that. ASIC miners, Bitcoin or altcoins. One of the mistakes that we did was we went with the D3 miners. Those were extremely profitable when they first came out. So the D3 miners were the Dash coin miners. At the time when they came out, when Dash was switching from GPU and Antminer came out with the D3 miners, those things were making upwards of several $1,000s per day if you could get a miner relatively quickly installed and running. Now, by the time we ordered these and the time they got into us, so when we ordered them, they were still making about $500 a day in profit. By the time we got them in and installed and running, well, even by the time we got them in our hands, the profitability on those went down from $500 to about $15. That's a big difference and a big change in your ROI estimates on those machines. And then once we got them already installed, they were like at $3 a day. So huge difference there, and we just never recouped our investment on those miners. Those things were over built, I guess you could say, or the production of those was just so massive, it just killed any profitability for anybody on those machines, unless you had really, really low cost of electricity on those. So Bitcoin miners buying in bear markets, this is the best time to be buying in this type of market that we're in currently. You want to also set some cash aside for purchasing in the next bear market. So whether you're going to be mining through in the next bull run, you want to set cash aside, or if you have cash aside, leave some for the next bull run, bear market, basically, because you're going to have newer, more efficient miners released regularly. So we're at 140 terahash right now. It's probably one of the most efficient ones from Antminer from Bitmain, and in a year we could see it be 200 terahash miners or 250 terahash miners. So you want to be prepared for eventually getting the next generation of more efficient miners, whether changing these out or adding another little container, shipping container with those newer generation miners. But you want to be prepared for something like this. Altcoins, like I said, no more than 10% of operations. We went almost 50-50. It was a little bit, I'd say it was 50-50. So we went 50% on Bitcoin, 50% on D3. That was a big mistake. We should have only kept that at maybe 10% at most. We did also get the L3 miners. Those were for Litecoin and Dogecoin. For the first couple of years, it was barely profitable on the Litecoin network. And then when Dogecoin started to rocket in price a little bit, that helped out tremendously there. But we only had 35 of those. So we didn't have a lot of them compared to everything else that we had. It was a small percentage of that, but it did help out when the other coin, Dogecoin, did bounce. So I would say no more than 10% of your operations. Do not buy when a coin changes over from GPU to ASIC mining unless delivered within the first 3 months of going live. So by that time, if you get it within 3 months, you can probably recoup your investment within the next 3 to 6 months, possibly, if that happens. If it's going to take longer than that, don't even try it. Stick with proven altcoins that have been mined with ASICs for several years. So Litecoin was one of those that we tried. It was okay. The machines ran for a nice long time. They didn't break down. They didn't overheat. And like I said, they were able to mine Litecoin and profitably for, I'd say, maybe 50% of the time, depending on the markets that we were in, bear or bull market. But once Dogecoin came into play with going above a penny and then going up way higher than that, it was quite nicely and very profitable at that point. So it's just one of those things you want to look out or pay attention to. But like I say, I wouldn't recommend going more than 10% on altcoin mining. Okay? ASIC inventory. Know where everything is at. So if you're doing a large farm, or even a farm with 100 to 200 miners installed, it is really important to know where those miners are. That way, if you can track which miner is having issues, you can track it down relatively quickly instead of trying to figure out where it's at. So what you want to do is scan all the miners into a spreadsheet or a database. And we scanned everything. We scanned the miners plus the PSUs that you had to order separately, but came with it. So we had all those barcoded. Well, they came barcoded, but we just scanned them all in. And then we had it all set up in a spreadsheet. We also set up bin locations for every miner in our facility that we had racks, we had aisles. We set it up as, aisle 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we set it up as shelf. So top shelf was A, then we went B, C, and D. And then we would go as far as 40 miners out. So then we would know it was 1A, 20 was first aisle, top rack, 20th miner, and we had them all labeled on the racks as well. So you also want to have a naming convention or a standard for your miners. That way you can track it back to where the miner is at your facility. So miner naming standard is really important because you can include that number, location number, when you're setting up the Bitcoin miner for initial setup. You have to put in the name of it. You can put the name of the miner in. It's up to a certain amount of characters, I think. Can't remember now exactly how many characters, but there's quite a few characters you can put in there, and that will help you out tremendously in the long run. Okay? Mining pool. So self-mine or join a pool or join a club. Self-mining is more difficult. You do get more rewards. You get the full reward, the 6 1/4 BTC that's mined, but it is not as consistent. So I would recommend, and even the big mining companies are using pools because it's just a more reliable income stream for that purpose. Small pool fees are included with that, and then you also want to get into a pool that has like API access to miners and stats. This is where it helps you out knowing which miners are operating, which ones are not, and then I'll actually tell you the name of the miner if you set it up correctly. Like I told you guys in the previous slide, it'll tell you that this is miner 2D34, and it's going to be aisle 2, rack D or shelf D, and it's going to be the 34th miner in the rack going. So you can quickly get into it, unplug it, plug it back in, restart it, whatever you got to do. Or you can also go into your spreadsheet, and if you kept all the IP addresses of the miners in there as well, you could go into that IP address, get into the miner itself, restart it there, see what's going on, and maybe see some stats on it along with error logs and things like that. So find out what's going on there. Okay, so that's important. But as far as mining pools, here's a quick list of them all. You got Foundry, you got Ant Pool, you got F2 Pool, Binance Pool. Those are kind of like the big dogs right now. Almost 3/4 of the market is on those. We used actually via BTC for pretty much the whole time. Some of these will not let you in unless you have a certain amount of petahash or exahash. I've learned that from Foundry. Ant pool, I know, I'm not sure about Ant pool or Binance pool if you need to have any amount of exahash, okay? So there's that. Then there's the big question, HODL or sell Bitcoin mined. There's two thoughts on this in the industry. Some HODL no matter what. They have sold in the past, but for whatever reason they got into a HODL strategy and they're HODLing through a bull run, a bear market, anything that comes in their way, they're HODLing through that. But these are large institutional players that are on the markets, on the stock market. So they have access to capital that normal people like myself, anybody that's got just a group of investors does not have that access to capital. It makes it a little bit more harder to HODL at that point. So in a HODL, in a bear market, I would say if you can do it, go ahead and do it. But it does take a huge amount of capital will be needed to HODL and survive the bear market. Your electrical cost is going to be your biggest cost, plus then your overhead as far as employees are concerned. If you have employees, if you're doing it by yourself, then you don't have that. And then if you're doing it by yourself, you probably have also probably not 100 miners or 200 miners or 1,000 miners. You have something smaller, you can probably handle it, where electricity cost is not going to bankrupt you. But if you have a lot of miners, you're looking at, well, let's just say you got 100 miners, you're looking at, 100 miners on a month, depending on the price. If you're at 6.5 cents, you're looking possibly close to, was it 18, 20,000? If my memory serves me correctly, somewhere around there a month. So it's definitely a huge chunk of change. And then if you're not profitable on that, now you have to pay other things that you may need to take care of as well. And it can get pretty hard to do. Okay. Next is do not store your coins on exchanges. Get them off exchanges if at all possible. Use a hardware wallet. Highly recommend that. And then sell in bull markets. Sell daily. You want to have some kind of accounting system as well for both, whether you're HODLing or doing selling daily. And you just want to keep track of how much you were rewarded for the day. What was the end of Bitcoin price at that day, and just keep track of everything that way. So that's going to take a little bit of work as well. Not that much, a couple minutes a day, but it does take some time for that. Okay. So I'll leave it at that. It just all depends on what your theory is as far as HODL or not to HODL. But one of the things that we've learned is we didn't sell daily, we sold monthly. That was a big mistake. So that was one of the things that we learned is you got to basically sell. And the reason for that is Bitcoin price can go from 9,000 to 13,000 in a month, or it can go from 13,000 to 8,000 in a month. So depending when you're selling, whether it's the beginning, the end, in the middle, somewhere in there, the price can have huge swings. And the only way to get that appreciation in price is to sell every day, because you just don't know where it's going to be. All right, so that's kind of what we learned. Some general tips. Bitcoin mining, excuse me. Set up a Corp, LLC, whatever you got to do to protect your own rear end. That's easy enough. That can be done without any issues. Bank account. Certain banks will not deal with you if you have anything to do with Bitcoin. We learned that. We went through 3 banks originally. I'm hoping things have changed since 2017. But when we were starting out, we had to go through 3 banks. First one, when they heard Bitcoin, right away said no. Second one, the person working with us wasn't sure. They had to go to their higher-ups. Higher-ups said no. Finally, the third bank is like, yep, okay, not a problem, that's fine. So you got to do that due diligence and find out which banks will actually work with you, because you still need to pay the bill. So you need to sell Bitcoin, get it into your account, and then pay your bills. Next is insurance. Insurance was also a tricky one. This was pretty tricky too. It took us like 3 or 4 months to find an insurance provider that would take us on, basically. All of the insurance companies that originally we were trying to work with had the same question. What are these machines? How are they storing data? How is the data being secured? And it's like you're trying to explain to these people, there is no data on the machines. It's just processing the network, and it's generating you income. They couldn't grasp that concept at all. So it took us like 4 months. We went through a bunch of different brokers and things like that, and luckily we were able to find somebody that was able to insure us. But we did insure just the miners, the facilities, and things like that, just to cover our butts a little bit. But that was still an expense there, right? So they wanted to have the serial numbers of everything that we had in stock, what was the price that we bought it in, what was the current value, and that had to get updated annually. So that's why it helps having the serial numbers recorded someplace, scanning all the miners, like I said. That actually helps in having everything buttoned up for that, okay? The other thing is, lastly, is a firm understanding of the effects the network hash rate, Bitcoin price, and electricity cost have on profitability. You need a you need a strong understanding of all that. Everything that has to do with Bitcoin, like the network hash rate goes up, you're making less. Network hash rate goes down, you're making more. Bitcoin price goes up, you're making more. Bitcoin price comes down, you're making less. Your electrical cost goes up, you're making less. Bitcoin electrical cost comes down, you're making less. So you have basically these three little levers that are all contributing to how profitable you can be. And you need to understand how those all work together. Whether you have spreadsheets or whatnot to put in the data that is available easily. Network hash rate is network. The network hash rate is easily available for you. So is the Bitcoin price. The cost for electricity, you obviously have to have that as well. So you can punch in all those numbers and see where things are trending, and you can keep track of everything that way. And that is it, I think. The biggest takeaway is, I guess you could say, planning is everything on this. Getting in at the right time makes all of the difference in this. And it's whether or not you can survive and grow and continue to grow, possibly. Whether you get in at the bull run. If you get into bull run, you're going to run into a lot more headwinds coming into it in the bear market, because you're going to be paying higher prices for miners. You're going to be paying a higher price for pretty much everything during that time frame. Whereas if you start out in the bear market, you're going to be paying a lot lower prices and everything. So that means you can possibly have reserves for when you do go back into a bear run, bear market, instead of spending everything that you had in the bull run to try and get it up and running. So that is it. I hope that kind of helps you guys out, understand everything that goes into it, and all the planning that you really need to do. There is a lot. And if you don't have the expertise in it, you need to find people that do have the expertise in it. You need to bring those people on board, and they have to believe in the same thing that you're trying to accomplish as well. And they have to understand everything that's going on within this industry as well to really be able to succeed in this, okay? So that is it. Hit me down with questions down in the comments below if you guys have any. I've answered probably close to maybe hundreds of questions from the previous video that I did. More than happy to do that again. But this is what I would do if I was to start over. Right now, I think we're, a year into this bear market right now. We are getting close possibly to the next bull run. This would possibly not be the time that I'll be getting into it unless I was doing only a couple miners. If I was doing a couple miners, doing it from home, from my garage, whatever it might be, I might pick up a couple miners because they're relatively cheap right now. So this would be the time to play around with things, learn things. And from that point on, when you get into bull run, you can, hopefully recoup your investment that you put into the miners. And then when you get into bear market, that, start planning the bull run for growing it and then building it out in the bear market and then doing, kind of repeat the process all over again. Okay. So that is it. Thank you so much for watching. Love you all. Have a great night. I'll see you guys in the next one.